Yeah, I love that. And you talked about kind of the hard data and bringing hard data, and you shared that net retention much higher, CSAT higher. We saw the same thing at Branch when I did a study. The net retention for those customers that had a shared Slack channel is something like, call it 125, or, making numbers up, 125 versus 105. It was like a vast difference. Tell us about why you think that is, and any other insights that you can share there.
I think in some ways I will be clear, like there's a selection bias, right? Like the customer has to accept your Slack channel to get into it and start chatting with you. And in my experience, at least when I receive Slack channel invites that I don't actually accept, typically means I'm maybe not the most engaged prospect, or I'm not the best champion, et cetera. And so I will say there's a selection bias of like the people accepting the invite are the people who are like interested in going to engage with you. But I think ultimately what you see, right, is like, that's where they work. That's where they want to connect. That's where they want to communicate. And if you meet the customer where they are, you're going to see vastly superior results than trying to force some sort of communication medium or style onto a customer that frankly doesn't communicate that way. And I think Kathryn brought it up earlier, but like our core audience is engineers, product managers, designers. These are all folks who work at organizations where they're like world-class, and they have software engineering processes and things that they all follow, and they have their own rituals and culture. And trying to come in and be like, hey, let's hop on a Zoom call when they're like, we don't do Zoom calls. You're just immediately alienating yourself to what those customers want and how they want to communicate. If you're like, hey, let's meet in Slack, and make it even bigger, like, hey, it might be MS Teams, it could be Discord, it might be WhatsApp, depending on where you are in the world. Like, figure out where the customer wants to communicate, and ultimately that'll drive superior results. And for us, that's Slack most of the time. But depending on your customer, it could be somewhere different.
Cool. Yeah. And Kathryn, I think you said earlier that you had this experience where some people don't even reply to emails these days. Would love to open it up. Are other people seeing something similar? I definitely see that. I've had some customers say, don't email me, Slack me or text me and I'll respond. But if you send me an email, I'm not going to respond. I'm curious what other people have seen, because I'm curious where email goes from here. So let's open it up to the broader group, whoever wants to go.
I definitely saw that too before we decided to open up Slack channels with everyone. We had some customers that said, we don't use email. All of our work is in Slack. So I'm never going to see anything you email, which definitely helped with making the case like, for this customer, we obviously need this solution. Like, this is the way to engage with them. This is the way to connect with them.
Yeah, I think some of our best anecdotes are cases where, some customers gotten emails for months and months, and they like reply once or never reply. You send them a separate email that's just like, hey, do you want to open a Slack channel? And they're like, that would be great. I can't wait. And you're like, wow, that was the one thing that got them to reply. None of the other things for 6 months. And that's just the reality of what customers want.
And Kathryn, similar for you? That's been your experience?
Yes, definitely. And I think part of it stems from the sales process, and that, when they're integrating our SDKs, they're working hand in hand with the sales engineer and the account executive. They get that kind of one-on-one experience to get set up for success. So then the expectation moving forward would be to continue to get that that sort of support from our team. So I think from my perspective, it is only good that starting off in the sales process, they're very engaged, they're, have some sort of excitement about trying the product. And so it continues throughout the customer journey that, through Slack is the main place that they're going to connect with us. And yes, I have several cases where, the people on my team are like, I've emailed the VP or the CTO several times. I'm like, have you tried DMing them over Slack? They're like, oh, I'll try that. And then, instantly we get a response, because people feel, it goes both ways, but people feel a need to respond over Slack, whereas email, I feel like there's a little bit of a barrier from having to respond. But then the same thing goes for when customers reach out to us over Slack. You know, you have to make sure that expectations are set in terms of response times. And obviously we want to respond as quickly as possible all of the time. But if you think about, you know, even a CSM's schedule, they're on customer calls all day. They can't be just staring, looking at Slack all the time. So I think that's another important thing, to make sure you set expectations with your customers for when to use Slack, when to submit tickets with our support team, and how quickly they should always expect to hear back from us as well.